Hi, everybody. My name is Emily DeAngelis, and I am in my backyard here in Virginia. About a quarter mile up the road from me is my local middle school where I worked for several years and still have great connections with staff and students there. Today, I want to consider the ethics of doing research in my own backyard. So, we're going to look at that through this presentation. Backyard research describes research that's conducted in an environment in which the researcher already has an existing role. So, an example of this would be a classroom teacher conducting research within his or her own classroom. This aligns with action research rather than the dissertation process. Action research is initiated to solve an immediate problem, or it can be a reflective process of problem solving that integrates research, action, and analysis. Our dissertation at Wilkes is theoretical, not action based. This is common in ethnographic research, and it's often referred to as insider or endogenous research. There comes about a big debate of insiderness and how you may not always be considered an insider at your own institution. Merton, in his 1972 writing, suggests that the insider doctrine, or this idea that only insiders can do proper research, and the outsider doctrine, the idea that only outsiders have the necessary detachment for proper research, are both fallacies because we're rarely completely an insider or an outsider. So we can debate the status of insiderness at our school or our institution. It's something to be considered when we think about doing this form of research. Another thing to consider is the integrity of the researcher. We know that this is especially important when you conduct qualitative research and act as the instrument to interpret the experiences of those in the study. But this becomes magnified if you're working with special populations that you already have a connection to. Additionally, if you're working with vulnerable populations like special ed or English language learners, you may have an additional bias or more to kind of consider when it comes to the integrity of your work as the researcher. When we think about bias, we already can tell that this form of research is going to be an additional source of bias. Hauser argues that bias is neither good or bad, and it's okay for the researcher to have bias as long as they're upfront about their connections. But you, as the researcher, have to make the decision of if you want this additional load of bias on your plate. There are some strengths to backyard research. It allows the researcher the opportunity to gain naturalistic data that isn't elicited by or affected by the actions of social researchers. You're also going to be better able to use phenomenological data because you're considered culturally literate if you're working with a population that you're familiar with. You'd be familiar with the language and the cultural nuances of the group that you're studying. There are some weaknesses of backyard research, and that might be what my yard looks like in a couple of weeks. But the researcher's involvement could limit their ability to produce natural observations, and it could have difficulties remaining anonymous. Some suggest that pseudonyms or other strategies can help preserve anonymity, but that's another thing for you to consider if you're to research close to home. There's also the potential for power dynamics to exist between the researcher and the participants. One suggestion for this um, is to use polyocular research, which means using multiple lenses. But there's not a lot of studies that use this form, and a big challenge is finding the resources to be both an insider and an outsider and to bring both perspectives together. When it comes to environmental research especially, we see the acronym NIMBY used a lot, and this stands for Not in My Backyard. This is an attitude that expresses discontent for a project that's located in one's backyard, but acceptance for a similar project that might be located elsewhere. So, not here, then where? When it comes to doing backyard research at Wilkes, it's not permitted. We prefer to focus on theoretical work for our dissertation. Dissertation research is intended to inform the broader audience and add to the academic literature rather than solving a problem that exists in our own school. So while it would be nice for me to go just a quarter mile up the road and work with staff and students I'm familiar with and I'm connected to, backyard research wouldn't be the best idea for my dissertation because it would bring in an added layer of bias and it would be action based rather than theoretical. I hope that this helped inform your understanding of backyard research, and thank you all for a great semester.